The stars looked different from the council station. Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck, watching ships from 47 different worlds dock and depart. 8 months ago, humanity had received the invitation they had dreamed about for generations. They were no longer alone in the universe. They had a place among the civilized species of the galaxy. Jake was the lead diplomat for Earth's delegation. His job was to make sure humanity fit in, to learn the rules, and to keep the peace. It was harder than he expected. Many of the alien species looked at humans with suspicion. They had studied Earth's history. They saw the wars, the conflicts, the violence. They called humanity a juvenile species that needed to be watched carefully. The Zthrian collective was the worst. They were one of the oldest members of the council. Their representatives made it clear at every meeting that they believed humans were dangerous. They voted against every human proposal. They questioned every human action. Jake had learned to ignore their hostile stares and cold words. Amy Peterson walked up beside him. She was the chief xenobiologist, responsible for helping humans understand alien cultures. She looked tired. "Another council session tomorrow," she said. "The Zthrians are pushing for new restrictions on human military vessels." Jake sighed. "Of course they are." "We knew this would be difficult," Amy said. "We just need to give it time. Eventually they'll see we're not the monsters they think we are." Jake wanted to believe that. He really did. The human quarter of the station was small but comfortable. About 200 humans lived there, mostly diplomats and their families, along with civilian contractors who maintained Earth's section of the massive structure. Children played in the common areas. Families ate together in the dining halls. It felt like a small piece of home floating in space among aliens. Danny Collins was 10 years old. His parents were engineers who worked on the station's life support systems. Danny was bright, curious, and friendly. He made friends easily, even with some of the alien children whose parents were more accepting of humans. Jake had seen the boy in the halls many times, always smiling, always asking questions about the different species on the station. Ambassador Kyle Richards was the senior human representative. He was older, experienced, and patient. He had spent his whole career preparing for this moment, for humanity's chance to join the greater galactic community. He believed in the council, in their laws, in their promise of peace and cooperation. The day Danny disappeared started like any other. His parents dropped him off at the Human Education Center in the morning. The teacher reported that Danny was there for the first class. But when lunchtime came, Danny was gone. The teacher assumed he had gone to meet his parents. His parents assumed he was still in class. By the time anyone realized he was missing, hours had passed. Jake was in a meeting when the alert came through. A human child was missing. Security protocols activated immediately. The human quarter went into lockdown. Every family was contacted, every child accounted for, every child except Danny Collins. Jake joined the search. They checked every human area, every place a child might wander. They found nothing. Amy pulled up the security footage. The cameras showed Danny leaving the education center during a break. He walked toward the central hub, where different species mixed. Then the footage stopped. "System malfunction," the display said. For exactly 12 minutes, the cameras in that section had failed to record. When the footage resumed, Danny was gone. Jake contacted Council Security. They were polite but slow. They promised to investigate. They said these things took time. They reminded him that the station was enormous, with thousands of beings from dozens of worlds. A missing child could be anywhere. They suggested Danny might have gotten lost, might be scared and hiding somewhere. Jake didn't believe that. Danny knew the station. He was smart. He would have asked for help. He would have found his way back. Ambassador Richards formally requested council assistance. He filed the proper reports, followed the proper channels. The council acknowledged the request. They assigned a junior investigator. They promised updates within the standard time frame of 72 hours. Danny's parents were devastated. His mother, Emma, couldn't stop crying. His father, Matt, wanted to search every corridor himself. Jake stayed with them, promising they would find their son. But as the hours turned into days, hope began to fade. The council's investigation moved at a crawl. The investigator asked questions but found no answers. The security footage could not be recovered. No witnesses came forward. The Zthrian representatives expressed sympathy, but suggested that human children might be more difficult to track than other species, given humanity's relative newness to the station. Jake began his own investigation. He talked to every human on the station. He reviewed every access log he could find. He noticed something strange. Several Zthrian scientists had accessed restricted areas during the time Danny disappeared. When Jake asked about it, he was told it was classified research, none of his concern. Amy helped him dig deeper. They found patterns. The Zthrians had been requesting information about human biology, human psychology, human children specifically. They claimed it was for cultural understanding, for academic purposes. The council had approved their requests. 3 weeks after Danny vanished, Jake received a coded transmission. It came through a back channel, encrypted, anonymous. Someone wanted him to see something. Someone wanted him to know the truth. Jake opened the file in his private quarters. What he saw made his blood run cold. The footage showed a sterile room, bright lights, medical equipment, and Danny Collins strapped to a table, screaming. Jake watched as Zthrian scientists conducted experiments on the child. They tested his reactions to pain. They measured his fear responses. They took samples, ran scans, pushed his small body to its limits. They documented everything with cold, clinical precision. The footage was dated. It started the day Danny disappeared. It continued for days. Jake forced himself to watch it all. He needed to know. He needed to understand what they had done. At the end of the footage, Danny stopped moving. The scientists noted the time of death. They discussed the valuable data they had collected. They talked about filing their report with the Council Research Committee. Jake sat in the darkness of his quarters. The video paused on the final image of Danny's small, still form. His hands shook. His mind raced. They had taken a human child. They had tortured him. They had killed him. And somewhere in the Council's bureaucracy, there was a report that approved this horror. He sent the footage to Ambassador Richards. He sent it to Amy. He sent it to Earth. Then Jake Morrison began preparing for war. The footage reached Earth within hours. Every government official, every military commander, every news network received copies. The world watched in horror as Danny Collins suffered and died at alien hands. The reaction was immediate and absolute. Rage swept across humanity like a wildfire. Dr. Lisa Hammond was brought to the Council Station on the fastest ship available. She was a trauma specialist, someone who had spent her career helping victims of violence. But nothing in her training prepared her for what she saw in that footage. She watched it once, then refused to watch it again. She didn't need to. The images were burned into her mind forever. Ambassador Richards called for an emergency council session. He demanded answers. He demanded justice. The council chambers filled with representatives from all member species. The Zthrian delegation arrived with their legal advisors and diplomatic shields. They looked calm, almost bored. Richards presented the evidence. The footage played on screens throughout the chamber. Some representatives looked away. Others watched with various expressions that human faces couldn't read. The Zthrians watched without emotion. When the footage ended, the council chamber was silent. Then the Zthrian lead representative spoke. His voice came through the translator in flat, measured tones. The research was approved through proper channels. The subject was selected based on established protocols for studying potentially aggressive species. All procedures followed council guidelines for biological assessment. Richards stared at him. You tortured a child. We conducted necessary research on a juvenile specimen of your species. The Council's Xenobiology Committee authorized this study to determine if human aggression patterns emerge during development or are learned behaviors. Amy Peterson stood up, her voice shaking with fury. He was 10 years old. He was a child. You strapped him to a table and hurt him until he died. The Zthrian representative consulted his datapad. The specimen's age was within acceptable parameters for developmental study. Termination was not intended, but occurred due to unexpected physiological responses. This data has been valuable for understanding human limitations. Jake Morrison watched the council members. Some looked uncomfortable. A few whispered to their aides. But none of them stood up. None of them demanded punishment for the Zthrians. None of them seemed to understand the magnitude of what had happened. The council chair, a massive creature from a species that had been in space for 5,000 years, spoke. This is indeed a tragedy. The council extends its deepest sympathies to the human delegation. However, we must recognize that the research was conducted within legal parameters. The Zthrian collective followed established procedures. Legal? Richard's voice was quiet, dangerous. You're telling me it was legal to kidnap and torture a human child? The acquisition was approved as specimen collection for approved research. The procedures, while regrettable in outcome, were within the bounds of xenobiological study protocols. Jake watched Richard's face change. The ambassador had spent his whole career believing in diplomacy, in rules, in the civilized nature of the council. That belief was dying right in front of Jake's eyes. The council offered mediation. They suggested a formal inquiry that would take months. They proposed establishing new guidelines for future research. They mentioned compensation. The Zthrian collective, through their representatives, offered a formal apology for the unfortunate conclusion of their study. They also offered a monetary payment to Danny's family for their loss. Emma and Matt Collins were brought into the chamber to hear the council's offer. Emma stared at the Zthrians with empty eyes. Matt's hands clenched into fists. The translator explained the compensation amount. It was, by galactic standards, quite generous. It would make them wealthy by human measures. Matt Collins spoke clearly into the silence. You think you can pay us for our son? The Zthrian representative seemed confused by the question. It is standard procedure for specimen loss during approved research. Matt took a step forward. Security moved to intercept him, but Jake stopped them with a gesture. Matt stood in front of the Zthrian delegation. My son was not a specimen. He was a boy who loved to read. He liked to draw pictures. He wanted to be a pilot someday. You stole him from us. You hurt him. You killed him. And you think money makes that right? We followed all appropriate protocols. Emma Collins finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I hope you burn. The council concluded the session with a promise to review their research guidelines. They offered humanity the compensation package and a formal apology to be entered into official records. They suggested that cultural differences might have led to this unfortunate incident. They promised it would never happen again. Ambassador Richards stood. The chamber went quiet. Everyone expected him to negotiate, to argue for better terms, to work within the system. That was what diplomats did. Instead, he said one word. No. The council chair leaned forward. Ambassador Richards, please understand that this is a generous offer given the circumstances. No, Richards repeated. We don't accept your money. We don't accept your apology. We don't accept your promises. He looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. You took our child. You tortured him. You watched him die. You documented it. You filed reports about it. And then you offered us money. He gathered his documents. Jake stood with him. Amy stood. Every human in the chamber stood. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We want nothing from you. We will accept nothing from you. You are not civilized. You are not peaceful. You are not worthy of our presence." The council chair tried to speak, but Richards cut him off. "You wanted to know if humans were dangerous. You wanted to study our aggressive tendencies. You wanted to understand what we're capable of." He looked directly at the Zthrian delegation. "You're going to find out." General Ryan Matthews was waiting when the human delegation returned to their quarters. He had arrived from Earth with a fleet of military ships. They were small compared to Council vessels, but they were fast and heavily armed. Matthews was a career soldier, a man who had spent his life preparing for wars that never came. Now war had found him. "General," Richards said, "humanity needs to send a message." Matthews nodded. "I've already begun preparations. The President has authorized full mobilization. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have." He paused. "Sir, we're not strong enough to fight the entire Council." "We don't need to fight the entire Council," Richards said quietly. "We only need to fight the Zthrians." Jake looked at the star charts on the wall. The Zthrian collective controlled 7 worlds. They had a population in the billions. Their military was one of the strongest in Council space. By every measure, they were far beyond humanity's ability to defeat. But Jake thought about Danny Collins, about his screams in that sterile room, about the cold voices of the scientists as they documented his death. He thought about every human child on Earth, on Mars, on the colonies, on stations throughout human space. He thought about what the Council had shown humanity about the universe beyond Earth. And he understood that some things mattered more than survival. Some things mattered more than peace. Some things were worth burning the galaxy for. "How long until we're ready?" Richards asked. Matthews checked his datapad. 30 days. We need time to gather the fleet, to arm the ships, to prepare for a sustained campaign." Richards nodded. "Send a message to the Zthrian collective. Tell them they have 30 days to evacuate their worlds. After that, we're coming." "Sir," Matthews said carefully, "they won't believe us." Richards smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "I know." President Nicole Brennan addressed humanity from the Council chambers in Geneva. Every screen on Earth, Mars, the colonies, and the stations showed her face. She looked tired, but determined. Behind her stood the flags of every nation that had united to reach the stars. "My fellow humans," she began, "by now you have all seen the footage. You know what happened to Danny Collins. You know how he suffered. You know how he died." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "The Galactic Council has offered us money for his death. They have apologized for the inconvenience. They have promised to review their procedures." Her voice hardened. "We reject their money. We reject their apology. We reject everything they stand for. They asked us to join their civilization. They promised us protection under their laws. They failed. They failed Danny Collins. They failed his family. They failed every human child who trusted us to keep them safe." Nicole leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "Today, I authorize the full mobilization of Earth's military forces. Every ship will be armed. Every soldier will be ready. Every weapon we have will be pointed at those who took our child." She paused again. "The Zthrian collective has been given 30 days to evacuate their worlds. After that, we are coming. And we are bringing hell with us." The galaxy watched in confusion. Humanity's military was small by Council standards. Their ships were primitive. Their weapons were outdated. Many species believed it was an empty threat, human emotion overwhelming human reason. The Council sent diplomatic messages urging restraint. They offered meditation services. They warned that aggression against a Council member would result in collective defense protocols. Humanity ignored them all. Admiral Chris Hawkins took command of the human armada. He was 53 years old, a veteran of Earth's last war, a man who understood strategy and sacrifice. He stood on the bridge of the EDF Righteous and watched as ships gathered from every corner of human space. They came from Earth, from Mars, from the asteroid mines, from the colony worlds. Every vessel that could mount a weapon was being retrofitted for war. Dr. Eric Walsh worked in a secure facility beneath the lunar surface. He was humanity's leading weapons researcher, a man who had spent years developing technologies that most people hoped would never be used. Now he worked around the clock, finalizing designs for weapons that violated every Council treaty on warfare. The Council had rules about what was acceptable in combat. Humanity no longer cared about Council rules. Colonel Megan Torres assembled her Special Forces teams. These were the best soldiers humanity had, trained for operations in hostile environments, prepared for missions that regular troops couldn't handle. Torres had lost a nephew in a civilian accident 5 years ago. She understood what Danny's parents were feeling. She volunteered to lead the first assault. The Zthrian collective responded to humanity's ultimatum with dismissal. Their military commanders issued statements about human foolishness. Their diplomats laughed at the threat. 7 worlds, they said, protected by defense fleets that had never been defeated. They had ships that could destroy planets. They had weapons that humanity had never seen. They had 3,000 years of military experience. They had everything except the understanding of what they had done. On day 15, the Council voted to invoke collective defense protocols. 23 species agreed to defend Zthrian space against human aggression. They deployed fleets to Zthrian worlds. They sent ships to patrol the borders. They prepared for a short conflict that would teach humanity the price of challenging Council authority. But other species did not join. Some remained neutral, citing domestic concerns. Others quietly withdrew their ambassadors from Council stations. A few sent secret messages to human diplomats, expressing sympathy and offering information about Zthrian defenses. The Council was not as united as it appeared. Jake Morrison visited Danny's parents before the fleet departed. Emma and Matt had refused to leave the station. They wanted to be there when it ended, one way or another. Jake found them in their quarters, surrounded by pictures of their son. Danny smiling at his birthday party, Danny in his school uniform, Danny playing with other children. "We're leaving soon," Jake said quietly. "I wanted you to know that we're going to make this right." Matt looked at him with hollow eyes. "Nothing can make this right. Our son is dead." "I know," Jake said, "but we can make sure it never happens again. We can make sure the galaxy remembers what it costs to hurt a human child." Emma spoke without looking up from Danny's picture. "Burn them all." On day 27, Admiral Hawkins gave the order. The human armada departed from staging areas throughout human space. They didn't wait for day 30. They had given the warning. They had offered the chance to evacuate. Now they were done talking. The fleet was enormous. Every military vessel Earth had ever built, joined by converted civilian ships mounting whatever weapons could be attached. There were carriers and cruisers, destroyers and frigates, even mining ships equipped with kinetic launchers. They moved together, a swarm of human rage heading toward Zthrian space. The Council detected the fleet immediately. They sent more warnings. They threatened sanctions. They promised military intervention. Hawkins ignored every message. He had one target, one mission, one purpose. Everything else was just noise. Captain Alex Morgan commanded the EDF Vengeance, one of the lead ships in the Vanguard. She was 32 years old, the youngest captain in the fleet. She had requested this assignment specifically. Her daughter was 8 years old, only 2 years younger than Danny had been. Every time Morgan closed her eyes, she imagined her own child on that table, screaming for help that never came. It made her hands steady on the controls. It made her aim true. Lieutenant Katie Foster served as tactical officer on the Vengeance. She had lost a cousin on the Council station, a young man who worked as a maintenance tech. He had been friends with Danny, had helped the boy with his homework. Katie had watched the footage 3 times, memorizing every detail. She knew exactly which Zthrian scientists had participated. She had their names, their faces, their positions. She was keeping a list. The fleet reached the edge of Zthrian space on day 29. The Zthrian defense fleet was waiting for them, backed by Council reinforcements. They had nearly 300 warships, all larger and more powerful than anything humanity possessed. Their commanders opened communication channels, offering one last chance for humanity to surrender and accept Council judgment. Admiral Hawkins appeared on screens throughout both fleets. He looked calm, almost peaceful. Danny Collins was 10 years old, he said quietly. He liked to draw pictures. He wanted to be a pilot. You tortured him to death because you wanted to study human aggression. He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had already made peace with what came next. Let me show you what human aggression really looks like. The human fleet attacked. There was no warning, no declaration, no formal beginning to the battle. One moment, there was silence in space. The next moment, there was war. The Zthrian commanders expected a cautious approach, probing attacks, defensive postures. They expected humanity to fight like a civilized species, following the standard patterns of Council warfare. They expected rules. They were wrong. Human ships came in fast and hard, ignoring damage, ignoring losses, ignoring everything except their targets. They used weapons the Council had never seen, tactics that violated every convention of space combat. They didn't try to disable enemy ships. They didn't aim for strategic targets. They aimed to kill, pure and simple. Engineer Sam Rodriguez watched his creation work from the CIC of the righteous. He had designed the Hellfire munitions, projectiles that burned through shields and turned the inside of ships into ovens. He watched as the first Zthrian cruiser died, its hull glowing red as the crew inside cooked alive. He felt nothing. He thought of Danny Collins. He loaded more munitions. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Zthrian home fleet was gone. Destroyed, scattered, running for their lives through the dark. Council reinforcement ships had fled after the first hour, unwilling to face the human onslaught. The Zthrians were alone, and humanity had just begun. The Zthrian homeworld appeared on the view screens of 1,000 human ships. It was beautiful in its own alien way, blue and green with swirling clouds. Cities covered the surface, billions of lives going about their daily existence. They had no idea what was coming. Admiral Hawkins opened a channel to the planet's surface. His message was simple. This is Admiral Chris Hawkins of the Human Defense Force. You have 1 hour to evacuate all civilians to designated shelters. All military installations and government facilities will be destroyed. Anyone remaining in those locations after 1 hour will die. This is your only warning. The Zthrian government responded with outrage. They demanded the humans leave their system immediately. They threatened retaliation. They called for Council intervention. Hawkins closed the channel without responding. He had said everything that needed to be said. 60 minutes later, human ships began orbital bombardment. They didn't target civilians. They didn't aim for homes or schools or hospitals. But every military base, every government building, every research facility was marked for destruction. The same weapons that had been used to study Danny Collins now guided the targeting systems. Poetic justice, someone called it. Hawkins called it necessary. The bombardment was precise and thorough. Kinetic weapons fell from orbit like hammers of God, turning military installations into craters. Energy weapons carved through defense shields and reduced command centers to melted slag. The Zthrian ground forces tried to fight back, but their weapons couldn't reach orbit. They could only watch as their world burned. Captain Morgan led the assault on the primary research facility, the place where Zthrian xenobiological studies were conducted. Intelligence had confirmed it was where Danny's experiments had been designed. She personally oversaw the destruction of that building, making sure nothing remained but ash and memory. When it was done, she sat in her command chair and cried for the first time since leaving Earth. The Council sent fleet after fleet to stop the human advance, but none of them engaged. Species after species looked at what humanity was doing and decided they wanted no part of it. The Zthrians had been allies, trading partners, friends to many council members. But watching the systematic destruction of their worlds, watching the cold efficiency of human rage, changed calculations. Better to let the humans burn themselves out than risk becoming targets themselves. Lieutenant Foster tracked down the scientists from the footage. Intelligence had their locations. 3 were on the homeworld, in what used to be the research facility. They died in the first bombardment. She marked them off her list. 4 more were on the second Zthrian colony world. She made sure the tactical teams knew exactly which building to hit. They marked them off her list together. The Zthrian government tried to surrender on the second day. They offered reparations, territory, technology. They begged for mercy. They invoked council law. They promised trials for those responsible. Hawkins transmitted his response to every Zthrian world simultaneously. It was a video of Danny Collins screaming on that table, followed by 3 words. "We want nothing." The second colony world fell on day 3. The defense fleet had already fled. The orbital stations were empty. Only the planet remained, and humanity took it apart piece by piece. Military targets first, then government infrastructure, then industrial capacity. They left the cities intact, but removed everything that made the colony useful. When they left, the world could support life, but nothing else. The third world tried to fight. Their defense coordinator was a Zthrian military hero, famous for never losing a battle. He organized the remaining fleet, planned a brilliant defense, prepared to make the humans pay for every inch of space. It didn't matter. Human tactics weren't about winning battles cleanly. They were about overwhelming force applied without hesitation. The hero died when his flagship was cut in half by weapons that shouldn't exist. His defense lasted 14 minutes. Council species began withdrawing their ambassadors from each other. Trade agreements were suspended, defense pacts were quietly dissolved. The careful alliance that had maintained peace for 3,000 years was cracking. Not because of what humanity was doing, but because of how the Council had responded to Danny Collins. Some species sided with humanity in private. Others simply wanted no part of the conflict, but all of them watched and learned what happened when you hurt a species' children. Matt and Emma Collins watched the reports from their quarters on the Council station. Every destroyed installation, every burning military base, every Zthrian government official running for safety. It should have felt like justice. It should have made the pain less. But their son was still dead, and nothing humanity did could change that. Emma turned off the feed. She didn't want to watch anymore. Matt kept watching. He needed to see it through to the end. Ambassador Richards had resigned his position. There was no more need for diplomats, no more room for negotiation. He stayed on the station anyway, a witness to what humanity had become. Jake Morrison found him in the observation deck one evening, watching the stars. "We're winning," Jake said. "Are we?" Richards asked. "We've destroyed 4 worlds now. We've killed millions. We've shown the galaxy that humans are exactly what the Zthrians thought we were. Dangerous, violent, aggressive." He turned to face Jake. "Is this what we wanted?" "They tortured a child," Jake said quietly. "They killed him. They documented it. They offered us money. What did you expect us to do?" "I expected us to be better than this." Richards looked old suddenly, worn down by the weight of what he had set in motion. "I expected us to prove them wrong." "We did prove them wrong," Jake said. "They thought we were dangerous. They had no idea how dangerous we really are." The fourth world surrendered without a fight. The government evacuated. The military laid down their arms. The people stayed in their shelters and prayed to their gods for mercy. Humanity showed them a small measure of it. They destroyed only military targets. They left infrastructure intact, They broadcast instructions for rebuilding. Then they moved on to the fifth world. By the end of the first week, 3 more Council species had withdrawn from the Collective Defense Pact. 2 species sent secret envoys to human ships, offering intelligence on Zthrian positions in exchange for assurance that they would not be targeted. Humanity accepted the information, but made no promises. They weren't interested in alliances anymore. The Zthrian Collective formally surrendered on day 9. Their government, what remained of it, transmitted an unconditional surrender to the human fleet. They agreed to any terms humanity demanded. They offered their remaining worlds without resistance. They begged for the killing to stop. Admiral Hawkins read the surrender offer. He consulted with President Brennan. He talked to General Matthews. Then he sent his response to the Zthrian government and to every world in Council space. We do not accept your surrender. We accept nothing from you. You took a child. You hurt him until he died. You felt no remorse. You offered us money. Now you face the consequences. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. There will only be the end. The human fleet continued to the 5th world, then the 6th, then the 7th and final Zthrian colony. By the end of the 2nd week, every Zthrian world had been rendered effectively dead. The population survived, evacuated to refugee ships and neighboring systems. But their military was destroyed. Their government was scattered. Their infrastructure was gone. The Zthrian Collective, one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, ceased to exist as a functioning civilization. Humanity stopped firing. Not because they had accepted surrender, but because there was nothing left to destroy. The fleet held position in Zthrian space, waiting. The galaxy held its breath, wondering what would come next, wondering if humanity would be satisfied with the destruction of one species, or if their rage would spread to the Council itself. On the Righteous, Admiral Hawkins sat in his quarters and looked at a picture of Danny Collins that someone had printed and pinned to the wall. A smiling boy who wanted to be a pilot. A child who died screaming in a room full of scientists who felt nothing. Was it enough? Someone asked. Hawkins turned to see Colonel Torres standing in his doorway. He thought about it for a long moment. No, he finally said. Nothing will ever be enough. But it's done. Torres nodded. What happens now? Hawkins stood up, straightening his uniform. Now we go home. And we make sure the galaxy never forgets what happened here. The human fleet returned to Earth 3 weeks after the bombardment ended. There were no victory parades, no celebrations in the streets. People watched the ships come home in silence, understanding that something fundamental had changed. Humanity had gone to the stars seeking friends and found only proof that the universe was cold and cruel. The Galactic Council was in chaos. 17 species had formally withdrawn their membership. 8 more had suspended participation indefinitely. The remaining members met in emergency sessions, trying to understand what had happened, trying to decide what to do about the humans who had shattered 3,000 years of peace. Ambassador Hannah Price was chosen to replace Kyle Richards. She was younger, harder, less willing to compromise. She had watched the footage of Danny Collins die a dozen times, forcing herself to understand what humanity was dealing with. When she arrived at the Council station for her first official appearance, she came with armed guards and made it clear she trusted nothing the Council said. The Council chair tried to welcome her with formal ceremony. Price cut him off. I'm not here for ceremony. I'm here to deliver a message from humanity. She activated a holographic display. Images of Danny Collins appeared, smiling pictures from before his abduction. Then images of what the Zthrians had done to him. Several council members looked away. Price didn't let them. This is what your civilization allowed, she said. This is what happened under your laws, following your protocols with your approval. You asked us to join you. You promised us protection. You failed. She let the images hang in the air. Humanity withdraws permanently from the Galactic Council. We want nothing to do with your civilization. We will establish our own space, our own laws, our own future. The council chair attempted diplomacy. Ambassador Price, we understand your anger. The council has condemned the actions of the Zthrian researchers. We have established new protocols to prevent such tragedies. You offered us money, Price said quietly. You told us it was legally acceptable to torture a child to death. You expect us to forget that because you wrote new rules? She shook her head. The Galactic Council is not civilized. You are not peaceful. You are not worthy of humanity's trust. She produced a document, physical paper, in a galaxy that had abandoned such things centuries ago. These are the Collins Protocols, named for Danny Collins and his parents. Any species, any government, any individual that harms a human child will face total war from humanity. No negotiation, no mercy, no exceptions. She placed the paper on the council table. These are not requests. These are not suggestions. These are facts. Test them at your own risk. Commander Matt Sullivan took control of the new human border security force. His job was to make sure no alien ships entered human space without permission, and to make sure humanity never depended on the Council for anything again. He established patrol routes, inspection protocols, and response procedures. Any ship that came too close to human territory was escorted away. Any ship that refused to leave was destroyed. There were 3 incidents in the first month. After that, everyone got the message. Dr. Ashley Kent studied the Council's response to human actions. She was a xenopsychologist, trying to understand how the galaxy thought, how they saw humanity now. Her reports were disturbing. Some species feared humans, seeing them as unstable and dangerous. Others respected the show of force, understanding that humanity protected its own. A few species began reaching out through back channels, suggesting trade agreements and defense pacts outside of Council oversight. The Council formally condemned humanity's destruction of the Zthrian worlds. They passed resolutions, they made speeches, they declared humans to be in violation of countless galactic laws. None of it mattered. Humanity had shown that Council authority meant nothing when backed only by words. Power, real power, came from the willingness to use force without hesitation. But something else happened too. Species that had stayed silent during the crisis began speaking up. Some admitted they had known about the research program. Others revealed similar programs targeting different species deemed dangerous or primitive. The Council's veneer of civilization cracked further as victims came forward, as evidence emerged of other experiments, other abductions, other deaths buried in classified reports. The Council chair resigned in disgrace. 3 senior members were expelled. The entire Xenobiology Committee was disbanded. The Council promised reforms, investigations, justice, but the damage was done. The galaxy had seen what the Council really was behind its peaceful facade. Matt and Emma Collins never left the Council station. They stayed in their quarters, surrounded by pictures of their son. Admiral Hawkins visited them before returning to Earth. He found them sitting together in silence, holding hands. "It's done," Hawkins said quietly. 7 worlds. Everything they had. They'll never hurt another child. Emma looked at him with empty eyes. "Does it help? Does destroying them bring Danny back?" "No," Hawkins admitted. "Nothing brings him back. But every species in the galaxy now knows what happens when you hurt our children. Maybe that prevents the next Danny Collins." Matt spoke without looking up. "We got a message yesterday from the Council. They're granting Danny posthumous status as a protected innocent. Some kind of honor they invented." He laughed bitterly. "They think that matters." Hawkins had no response to that. He stood there for a moment, then quietly left. Some wounds didn't heal. Some prices couldn't be paid. Some things were simply broken forever. Jake Morrison requested reassignment to the new colony worlds, far from Council space. He couldn't stay on the station, couldn't walk past the education center where Danny had last been seen. Amy Peterson went with him. They helped establish human settlements in deep space, places where children could grow up without fear of aliens who saw them as specimens. Kyle Richards retired completely. He spent his remaining years writing a memoir about humanity's brief time in the Council. The book was titled We Tried to Believe. It became required reading in diplomatic schools, a reminder of what happens when civilization fails its most vulnerable. 5 years after Danny Collins died, humanity completed construction of a memorial station at the edge of human space. It was visible from Council territory, a permanent reminder. The station was named Collins Station, and it served as both a memorial and a school. Human children learned there about why humanity stood alone, about what the galaxy had done, about the price of trust. In the central chamber, a statue of Danny Collins stood smiling, holding a book. Beneath it, an inscription read simply, "He never raised a fist. He never showed aggression. He never proved their fears right. But we showed them what monsters really look like when you hurt our children." Delegations from alien species sometimes requested permission to visit Collins Station. Some came to pay respects. Others came to understand what had happened. All of them saw the same thing, a galaxy of human children learning, playing, growing up safe, and all of them understood that humanity would burn worlds to keep it that way. The Galactic Council continued without humanity. They made their laws, held their meetings, maintained their civilization. But everything was different now. Every species remembered what happened to the Zthrians. Every leader thought twice before approving research on unknown species. Every scientist hesitated before crossing lines that seemed innocent. And in the empty space where Zthrian worlds used to thrive, the Council placed a marker, a warning to anyone who might forget. It showed an image of Danny Collins and a simple message: the price of cruelty. Hannah Price stood at the viewing port of Collins Station, watching ships pass in the distance. Human ships, moving freely through space that humanity had claimed. Behind her, children laughed and played, safe and protected. She thought about what humanity had lost to get here, about the innocence they had sacrificed, about the darkness they had embraced. But when she heard those children laughing, she knew it had been worth it. The galaxy had taught humanity a harsh lesson about the universe beyond Earth. And humanity had taught the galaxy something in return. Some species built civilizations on laws and treaties and careful diplomacy, but humanity built their civilization on something older, something more primal, something the Council had never understood. They built it on the absolute, unwavering promise that their children would always be protected, no matter the cost, no matter the consequences. The Council had tortured a human child. Humanity had burned their worlds in return, and the galaxy would never forget either truth.